取られます。ノートですね。はい、どうぞ。
ありがとうございます。
来週のツアーお待ちしてます。今週だ。今週です。月曜日か。頭がおかしい。ひなさんご案内大丈夫ですか？はい。はい。
You want me to sit down or to stand up?
Stand up, okay. Go on. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. I'm Dan Sloan, president of this organization. The Nobel Peace Prize was awarded last year to Nihon Hidankyo, the Japan Confederation of A and H-bomb sufferers organizations, a grassroots movement that represents survivors of the August 1945 atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It also works to eradicate nuclear weapons. Nihon Hidankyo was the first Japanese group to join 29 Japanese individual laureates in peace, sciences, and literature. It had been 50 years since the last Nobel Peace Prize winner, former Prime Minister Eisaku Sato, in part for his own stance against nuclear weapons. For the story behind what makes a Nobel laureate, the FCCJ is proud to welcome Jørgen Frans, I hope I pronounced that correctly, chair of the Norwegian Nobel Committee, and I should say he is also director of PEN, which supports journalists, PEN Norway. Last week in Japan, he hailed the atomic bomb survivors' testimonies as inspirational for eliminating nuclear weapons, while also urging Japan and other countries to take action against their threat. He made a personal visit to Nagasaki and Hiroshima to speak with them. Our 40-year-old Norwegian guest became chairman of the Nobel Committee last year. It will hold, or did hold, a separate event in Japan calling for nuclear disarmament or discussion. Like Japan, Norway has also not signed the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. That came into force in 2021. On a separate topic, U.S. President Donald Trump has been nominated for this year's Peace Prize, both by Pakistan and Israel, or so they say, and a U.S. politician as well. We know that in the past, U.S. presidents have been nominated and won the prize, Barack Obama in 2009. But as a kind of disclaimer before our guest begins speaking, they neither make any comment on the nominees, the nominators, or anything else until the announcement, which is scheduled for October later this year. Moreover, for the latest on the Nobel process and in its selection of Nihon Hidankyo, with no further ado, our guest of honor, Nobel Chairman Franz.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having us, having me here. I would love to have a discussion and to get question also about the process itself. As said here, there are a lot of interesting things happening behind the curtains, behind the scenes, of how we actually come to the decision and the announcement in October. But first and foremost, I'm here also to tell the story of last year's Peace Prize and to emphasize why we are here in Japan in the first place. And of course that is, as mentioned, the 2024 Nobel Peace Prize to Nihon Hidankyo. It's the first time in the history of the Peace Prize, dating back to 1901, which was the first year the Peace Prize was handed out, that members of the committee actually go abroad and travel to the country which received the Peace Prize. So this is also a unique opportunity for us. It's a historic occasion in a very long and respected history of the Nobel Peace Prize. So we're also very glad that the first time ever it's actually coming here to Japan. The reason for that is, of course, related to that this year marks 80 years since the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a moment that shattered not only cities, but the moral consciousness of humankind. The prize to Nihon Hidankyo honors their tireless effort for a world free of nuclear weapons and their extraordinary efforts to bear witness to the horrors of nuclear war. The Hibakusha, the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, their voices are not echoes of the past. They are a moral compass in a world that sometimes seems to forget its direction. They remind us that nuclear weapons are not just abstract tools of war. They are instruments of mass death. Visiting Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we walked through places that changed the course of human history. We saw shadows etched in stone, names carved into silence. But most importantly, we heard the testimonies of pain, resilience, and of unshakable dignity. What happened in 1945 in these two cities was not just a military act. It was a rupture and a revelation. And from that moment on, we seems to be making, at least, the promise of never again. And that promise took many forms, in treaties, in institutions, in protest movements. But perhaps one of the most powerfully, it became a moral understanding of the nuclear taboo, an international norm that a shared belief that any use of nuclear weapons is not only dangerous, but deeply and morally unacceptable. In this time in world history, we must be honest. The taboo is under threat. We now stand at the edge of a new and more unstable nuclear age. Nuclear powers are modernizing their arsenals. New nations are seeking these weapons. Disarmament treaties are collapsing. And in today's conflicts, the threat to use nuclear weapons is returning to the public rhetoric. In the face of this, the task of remembrance becomes not only a moral thing, but an urgent one. And that is why the work done in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, through museums, in archives, literature, photography, artifacts, and testimonies, is so important. Coming here, visiting, and experiencing, we know that this is not just Japanese history. This is world history. And we must not allow it to be lost in time, or to bureaucracy, or to indifference. During our stay here, we met many young people. In all these cities we've gone to, at universities, in schools, in civil society, in the peace movement, they cannot touch 1945, but they can read a diary, and they can hear the voice of a hibakusha. They can stand in a place where the unimaginable happened, and they can choose not to forget. Remembrance is not a passive thing. It is peace work, it is disarmament, it is part of building a future safer for all of us. Memory work can be an act of resistance, an act for change. And we had a conversation before entering the room, and I truly believe that this is also where your role as journalism comes in. As journalists, you know the value of truth. You know how fragile memory can be, how easily reality can be buried under politics, distraction, or just silence. And that is why your role is so essential, especially now. The Nobel Committee knows this deeply. In 2021, we awarded the Nobel Peace Prize to Maria Ressa and Dmitry Muratov, two colleagues of yours, two journalists and editors receiving the prize for their courageous fight for freedom of expression and the importance of journalism. Free and fact-based journalism serves to protect against the abuse of power, lies, and propaganda. Freedom of expression and freedom of information help to ensure an informed public. You are also the stewards of memory. You are the ones who make history legible to the public. You are the one who can help the world see with clear eyes what they truly are at stake. So I say this also as a colleague, but tell the stories, investigate the threats, expose the dangers, and also resist the forgetting. We're all in this together. But let me return to the core message of the Nobel Committee's decision last year. It is not only honoring Nihon Hidankyo, it is also a warning. The atomic bomb survivors have provided a unique and deep personal insight into the consequences, the humanitarian effects of nuclear war. They have fought tirelessly for the rights of the hibakusha, against the development and the use of nuclear arms. But as I said, it's both a recognition and a call to action. A recognition of the hibakusha's role in shaping a global norm, in shaping the nuclear taboo, and a call to all of us to preserve it. Because nuclear disarmament is not just about weapons. It is about what kind of future we want to have, what kind of history we choose to remember, what kind of humanity we choose to uphold. I ended my speech in Oslo City Hall in December last year with the following words: "Let us listen to their testimonies. Let their courage be our inspiration. Let their persistence drive us forward. Let us all strive to keep the nuclear taboo intact. Our survival depends on it." And after spending many, many days here in Japan, that message, I think, is even more important to emphasize. How the hibakusha, how new generations, how different societies, some are forgetting, others are remembering. But in a situation where the nuclear taboo is under threat, it is of vital importance for all of us to remember what is at stake, remember the testimonies, and to make an effort to resist forgetting and improving and maintaining the nuclear taboo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So we were honored last fall before the chairman went to Oslo to receive the award to host Tanaka-san here. Today you can watch that on the YouTube archive. Today we're live streaming on our YouTube platform, and you can watch today's event later. We're going to open the floor now to all of our working press first. We'll also be taking questions from online audience members. Please, if you can, try to limit yourself to one question, no speeches. Identify yourself and your affiliation. Our guest has a very tight out today, so at about 3:56, 7, we will stop taking questions, and he needs to get to NHK for an interview. But with that, please, let's open the floor to our first question today. Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Kenji Kawase from Nikkei. Please allow me to ask you a different question in terms of selecting a Nobel Peace Prize. Going back to 1989 and 2010, Nobel Committee awarded a 1989 Peace Prize to Dalai Lama, 2010 to Liu Xiaobo. Would you please comment on the situation that happened afterwards in China and surrounding Tibet? Because Dalai Lama just turned 90, and then China is talking about appointing the reincarnation for themselves. They are going to appoint, and then on for Liu Xiaobo, died 8 years ago, and nothing really happened. Things have actually gotten worse. And so, would you please comment on the situation of China, and then about the selection process of someone from country like China? Because I remember that China went off and retaliated against the Norwegian government of salmon import back then into 2010, if I remember correctly. So thank you very much.
Thank you. If you allow me for a bit of a long answer, because I can also include the decision-making process in itself, if that's okay. Because the Norwegian Nobel Committee is an independent committee. We have nothing to do with the Norwegian government. We have our deadline for nominations on the 31st of January. So for that time of year, we have the complete list of nominations coming from all around the world. We're a committee of 5 people. We have the Nobel Institute, and we have our director, secretary of the committee here as well, Christian Berg Harpiken. And we start our work of shortlisting and trying to narrow down the list. From last year, about 350 nominations, valid one, that is, because there's many other nominations as well. Not all are valid. And then we work our way through the discussions within the committee, and using an extensive network of scholars around the world, world-class scholars, academics that give input, give their research notes and background information on the topics that are of interest to the Nobel Committee. We work our way through the year, coming into the summer months, to see if I'm good at poker. We often tend to joke with the fact that if we are stressed out in the summertime, it means we're in a bad situation, meaning the progress of our work should be concluded, of course, before the announcement is made, the first whole week of October. So we are entering the months of August and September, and then we are really narrowing down the list to make the decision and then prepare for the announcement. On the 10th of December, that's where we celebrate the prize, have this prize ceremony in Oslo, and that is the day of Alfred Nobel when he died in 1896. So that's the common with the different prizes which is handed out in Stockholm, Sweden. Another, as Dan told you, of who is nominated and who is nominator is not revealed until 50 years after. So there is, we only comment on those who will receive the award, and that is made public in October. But all the deliberations, all who is actually nominated, and you read it in the press, who is nominated or not, well, that's often just, it's never verified by us. It's never verified by the Institute, so it's just someone who claims to be. Sometimes it's true, to be honest, sometimes it's not. But that's another thing. That's how we work, getting that information. When our decision is made and when our announcement is being published, that's basically our task. So we are, for instance, not a think tank or policymaker. We hand out the prize and our job stops there. So for instance, the developments in the countries you mentioned, there are better than me to talk about the developments. How, of course, what we want to do, as we have done this year in Japan, is to follow up the Nobel laureates of their work and to get the attention of the situation. But first and foremost, we are giving them the microphone for themselves to talk about the situation. We are not the ones who are talking on their behalf. We are giving them the platform also to talk. And this is also the concept of being here, of course, with Nihon Hidankyo and allowing them to tell their story. When it comes to the political pressure, in which you also referred to, it is true that Norway as a country and the government of Norway experienced quite the situation after the Peace Prize to Li Xiaobo. But that is not of our consideration. We only focus on the will and the testament of Alfred Nobel. We interpret that into modern day life because it was written in 1895, so of course you have to do so. And that is our only task, to award the prize to the person or the individual, to the institution or organization that has done the most for humanity based on the criteria set out from Alfred Nobel in 1896.
Yes, sir.
My name is Takuya Nishimura, the freelance news writer. There are some politicians as the Nobel Peace Prize laureate in the past. So do you have any norm or rule to select a politician for the Nobel Peace Prize laureate? I'm asking this because I believe a politician has two faces. One is leading peace, and another is leading war. So, what do you see when you choose politician for the Nobel Peace Prize?
Thank you. Of course, I'm only able to talk about how we as the present committee work, in the sense that what are we valuing in our decision making. The history of the prize clearly shows that many politicians, state leaders and others have received the award through from 1901 coming to this day. Peace is also about politics. So politicians, particularly the more powerful politician you are, the more difficult it can be to balance that role. The history of the prize clearly shows that in many peace processes, for instance, I can mention one, the president of Colombia, 2016 prize, for instance. He also was the Minister of Defense in the same, responsible for the same war against the guerrillas in Colombia. And these kind of dilemmas is something facing the committee and of course facing everyone else in the work of peace, and very often it's very hard to make those decisions. There's no one answer to your question. We believe that those who have made a big effort, it's a difficult task if you're on the one side have both a history of blood on your hands, responsible for atrocities, but at the same time have been responsible for making peace. That's the kind of dilemmas and reflections that we are discussing all the time. We are getting the input from academics and researchers from around the world, and we have to make a decision based on what we believe is the right thing and stand for it. So other than acknowledging the fact that you're precise in your question and it's a really tough nut to crack, there is no definitive answer to it.
And I believe that was President Gaviria. I forget his last name exactly, but he was here last month as part of, or a month and a half ago, as part of the Elder Group and spoke with other Nobel laureates. Yes, we'll take the next question. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for today. My name is Karin Nishimura. I'm the correspondent for Radio France in Japan. You mentioned that you met a lot of young people here in Japan, but living in Japan for many years, I feel that not a lot of young people are engaged in politics in general and against the nuclear weapon in particular. But rather, young people, Japanese, tend to believe in nuclear deterrence or even vote for politicians who ask for nuclear weapon also in Japan. So what is your impression? And do you think that Japanese politicians should not have that kind of debate here in Japan? About nuclear weapon. There is a debate here in Japan now. Should Japan have the nuclear weapon or not? And a lot of young people tend to think that deterrence, nuclear deterrence, is a necessity and tend to think that it should be an option.
I mean, having the debate is what every democratic society should have. So, in general, to have a public and open debate about the issues which is at the core of our security or core of our political system is definitely important. We believe that the world should, at some point in the future, not be dependent on nuclear weapons as a basis of our global security system. We believe that at some point in human history, we need to get rid of all nuclear weapons. We also acknowledge that that road is long, difficult, and filled with dilemmas. So we hope to listen to the hibakusha. We hope that new generations in Japan are listening to the hibakusha, and our message is that we hope they do it now, because the hibakusha are averaging in age of 85, they will no longer be here with us. They will no longer be part of your society because they are simply getting old and will die. And therefore, we also want to acknowledge the fact that Nihon Hidankyo has been doing a tremendous job for decade after decade through their pain, sorrow, and grief, but turning trauma into a force for peace. And by doing so, also allowing new generations through educational system, civil society, and others. Japan is a big country with a lot of young people. And of course, our hope is that this message will be heard by many, not a few. But it is similar in the home of my own, Norway. Many of the similar debate. Of course, the situation with Russia is the situation of Europe and our country. And so many of these debates sounds very familiar. But again, we need to emphasize that even though it is difficult, and even though that dilemmas are there, we should all listen to the hibakusha when they say nuclear weapons should never, ever be used again.
Yes, sir.
This is Tonegawa from Global Media Corporation. The awarding of Nobel Peace Prize to the Nihon Hidankyo is very highly significant. However, the Japanese government has not yet signed the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. How does the Nobel Committee view this situation? Do you hope that this Hidankyo's award will inspire a change in the Japanese government stance? Thank you.
Thank you. We hope that the Peace Prize to Nihon Hidankyo and the message of the hibakusha is not only heard in Japan and by the Japanese government, but from governments from around the world, including my own, the Norwegian one, which is in a very similar situation as the Japanese. It's good for us to hear that it's significant and that is well received in this country. And so it should be, because it is a truly remarkable experience also how all the hibakusha, and not only those who are alive today, who we are able to meet, and who are those who are honoring here in Oslo last year and here in Japan now, but all those hundreds of thousands that have died since 1945 and have contributed to the nuclear taboo. And the nuclear taboo is at the core of our message as well. That the Nihon Hidankyo has not only told their testimonies to themselves move on in life, but they've contributed to an international norm that has played an important role in all of global politics since. So our message is also the governments needs to support the nuclear taboo. And there's a variety of ways to do that, among others, not threatening of using nuclear weapons. So it's not as the history of Nihon Hidankyo and the hibakusha has shown, there's not only one way of establishing the nuclear taboo, there's not only one way of maintaining the nuclear taboo, that still counts, and that still goes for civil society, the survivors themselves, but also politicians and governments.
Yes, sir.
Hi. My name is Vibhav Upadhyay. I'm chairman of India-Japan Foundation, and we've been partnering with your Nobel Peace Institute for the last 10 years in working on how development and peace have correlation. And the last conclusion we had is that all the problems we see today in the world, including the war, nuclear war, whatever we are talking about, it has something to do with a mistake in the development model, which has been running for 400 years, 500 years, which is based on exploitation. So it's my suggestion, I'm not a journalist, my suggestion, the Nobel Peace category should be extended to development models, and also to see that if people who are working to correct the mistakes of the development models shall be directly related to peace, and that should be considered. That's my request.
Sir, do you have a question?
Suggestion. And question is, how do we basically segregate between a politician who's trying to bring a peace through a development model, and a politician which is trying to establish a peace by stopping the war? It's a very thin line, two different subjects. But does your committee has any mechanism to segregate between these two things?
Thank you. The history of the Nobel Peace Prize clearly shows that the Nobel Committee does not think that there's only one way for peace. Different parts of the world, different solutions, and at different times. So if you look at the broad categories of peace, everything is related to the testament and the will of Alfred Nobel, where he sets kind of the foundations for how we interpret that into the modern age. For instance, the very first Peace Prize, 1901, was awarded to the founder of the Red Cross. So from the very beginning, it was the humanitarian. It was those who made an effort for others. That category has been, there have been several prizes for humanitarian work ever since. Fraternity and brotherhood between nations, that's another one of the criteria. You see that in human rights. How, for instance, the 2023 Nargis Mohammadi of Iran, many other, Martin Luther King. So there are many other prizes in that category as well. And of course, then you have those who work for the peace agreements. But in the modern world, for the last decades, there have not been that many, of those formal peace agreements. But it's another category. And in the situation of the world we're living in now, I cannot comment on what will be the developments of the committee. But what I will say is that the history clearly shows that different times have given different prizes, and that our considerations is having a steadfast based on tradition and based on the criteria of the will, at the same time when the world is adapting, our decision making in the Peace Prize nomination work is also adapting.
Sir, I'm going to take the liberty to ask a question and trying to sleuth a little bit within the parameters of what you can't speak about. So if we think of this year's group of nominees, when you get to that very short list, I assume next month, September or latest, the period of nomination would have been from February 1 of 2024 until January 31st of this year. Is that correct? And when you get to, I guess, the ultimate short list, as you were identifying to me, the five of you are going to be going through maybe a handful of candidates, not more than that. Is that correct? Anything else you can tell us about the process over the next 2 months or so?
Well, it is worthwhile remembering what you mentioned about the time, because from 31st of January until October, the world changes. So if you look at the history of the prize, and the archives open on every year, 50 years. So this year, if you're interested, you can read all about the prize to Andrei Sakharov, which is very much related to the topic of nuclear weapons and nuclear war, as one of the greatest both human rights defenders, but also scientists in the Soviet Union. So you get that information after 50 years. It's a long time. How we, because of the nominations are from, so to say, the year before, that doesn't need to exclude anyone, because even though the criteria, one of the criteria set by Alfred Nobel is that it should be awarded to those who have made the greatest effort in the last year. But it's kind of impossible for making achievements within peace just for the last 12 months. So that's obviously stretched in our interpretation of how that criteria is.
So, yeah, just to clarify then, it isn't finite on January 31st that there'll be no new candidates.
It is.
Oh, okay.
Well, the only exception to that is actually on the very first meeting, which is happening straight after, the committee itself can also nominate. So, but in February, early February, the list is set. And therefore, let me use an example. In 2022, in our neighborhood of the world, in Europe, a quite significant war broke out. It was the 2014 invasion of Crimea, and then in the 2022, the full-fledged invasion from Russia on Ukraine. And that happened after the nomination deadline. So, of course, we are stuck with the list on the 31st of January, and that's what we have to deal with. So if there are initiatives in the world which a lot of people think that should receive the prize, some of the reasons why we do not award that prize, well, it might happen to be they're not on the list. I think the most famous of all who have such an experience is Gandhi.
Just elaborate a little bit. What happened with Gandhi?
Well, Gandhi did not receive the Nobel Peace Prize, and many would assume and think that he was worth giving the Peace Prize to. The one of the year, and this is open and publicly, the records are open. The committee did not give him the prize for that year. According to the notes, it's high probability that the committee would have decided to give them the prize next year. Then he died. So also in the statutes, you cannot give a prize posthumous.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Hi, I'm Keiko Kurane with UCA News. Do you think Japan is doing enough today morally and politically in leading nuclear disarmament? Thank you.
With the history of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and as the only country in the world have experienced the effects of atomic bombings, Japan has a special responsibility. In a world where the nuclear taboo is under threat, we really believe that that responsibility should be taken at the higher regard also from the Japanese authorities, to strengthen the nuclear taboo, to listen to the hibakusha, to make sure that these stories are told to new generations, That is a national responsibility. But I must also like to add, since we are talking about an issue which never can be just a national responsibility, because nuclear weapons, of the force that they are in this present situation, they are much more destructive than the weapons used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There's no probability of any future use of nuclear weapons will only have a local effect. It will affect people around the world. And therefore, we cannot limit that responsibility to just one nation, and particularly not to just the nation that have experienced that. It needs to be a global responsibility.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, this is my second time, but since no one else is raising their hand. I want to follow up on what you said earlier to my answer. Okay, so in the case of Liu Xiaobo, he was in prison, just like Otsieski in 1935, and then he died in prison. So were there any sort of consideration on the Nobel Committee Norway to sort of go to China and try at least make an attempt to give the prize, because he was not there at the award ceremony? Any sort of negotiation attempt since the Nobel Committee decided the award, the Peace Prize, to a person in prison? And then I'm sure there could be a case in the future similar to that. So would you give me your comment on that? Thank you.
Thank you. Basically, because it's before my time in the committee, I cannot talk about too much of the details. I know measures was taken, but allow me to also reflect on it by not saying it could be in the future, but we're in the same position now. In 2022, the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Ales Bialiatski of Belarus. In 2023, the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded Nargis Mohammadi of Iran. They have been both jailed for precisely the reason why they were awarded the prize, for their work of democracy and human rights. They are, Ales Bialiatski, for instance, he's still in prison in Belarus. His situation is not known to the world at this moment. The authorities in Belarus does not allow him to communicate with the world. And we, of course, use the occasions that we have. In the speech in Oslo City Hall in December last year, we were honoring the Nihon Hidankyo, where we're talking about the nuclear threat, but we were also appealing to the governments of Belarus and Iran to release our Nobel laureates unconditionally and immediately. So, to answer your question by two very recent examples, yes, the Nobel Committee has a limited amount of tools in the toolbox, so to say, but we use the ones we have, which one of them being public, to speak about it in public and to demand from the governments that they should listen to us and listen to us when we say that these should not be in prison because they work for human rights and democracy.
Yes, sir.
Obayas is my name, freelance and former Nikkei correspondent. My question is, this is not today's main theme, but I'd like to ask Mr. Donald Trump, American president, want to get Nobel Peace Prize. How do you think, what is the possibility of this?
Thank you for your question. First and most, I hope that all of us want to be the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. I hope you feel it's a great honor. and I can assure you that we will have a good time in Oslo if you do. So I hope we get as many nominations from around the world as we can. That said, as we talked about already, we never reveal who is nominated. We never reveal who is nominating them. And all that you have to wait until 50 years to see. So we don't make any comments on any of the nominations. What we only do is we talk about who will actually receive the prize, and that is limited to, actually I didn't mention that, so I can tell you also, it is according to our statutes limited to 3 recipients each year. So each 3 organizations or 3 individuals, but it can be up to 3 each year. And except talking about those 1, 2, or 3, we never comment, and we cannot comment on any nominations.
I'm just, Karen, I just want to follow up, and this isn't meant to be a facetious question, and I don't know the entire historical background, but has there ever been a year that the committee did not have a laureate to nominate? We obviously discussed that there was no prize awarded during the Second World War, but I would assume you always have a short list and you always have a laureate. Is that correct?
That is correct. I don't know actually the specific, if at some point in history, maybe Christian here knows, but if there's been no on the list from the outside that the committee actually had to do that, I don't think so. It's not very likely, but the historians would know. So I should probably know, but then I'll have to make a phone call back home to get the answer to that. Yeah.
Okay, understood. Here.
Once again, Karine Nishimura from Radio France. In the past, I remember in the 80s, 90s, a lot of artists and novelists, even in Japan, took position against nuclear weapons. I feel it's no more the case, at least in Japan. Do you have the same feeling, and do you regret that in this case?
If that is the case, then yes, we would regret that. Talking from my own home country, yes, you do not see the same anti-nuclear movements as historically there have been. That doesn't say there are not engagement for it. You see it in the peace movement, you see it in the anti-nuclear movement around the world. We see it and feel it very clearly here in Japan. Maybe not in the public, but the media interest has been enormous, as at least how we look at it. Not only here in Tokyo, but also in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We know from the voices of the Hibakusha that they are being heard in schools, in civil society, by the politicians. If it's enough, probably not, because the world is changing in a faster pace than we would like, in a negative direction. We are using this opportunity to push the alarm button as well, to say the nuclear taboo is under threat. States are modernizing. We are entering a new and more unclear and unstable nuclear age. And we, as human beings, humanity, needs to pay attention to that, because that is not the world we want to live in. We do not want to live where the world is a prison just waiting for collective annihilation. And we see engagement from around the world, and we see particularly how the prize of 2024 have reenacted many, many individuals and institutions and movements who see what the same as we see and want to act on it.
All right, we have time for about one more question. We'll open the floor once more. Yes, ma'am.
you. I'm Eriko Noguchi from Kyodo News. And it might be a similar question, but I'd like to ask about the way to uphold nuclear taboo. So in the conference held yesterday in Jochi University, one professor said the testimonies of Hibakusha generate fear for nuclear weapons, but that feeling can sometimes help, how can I say, people to think we need nuclear weapons in order to prevent such a horrible thing to come to us. So even Japanese people, as said other reporter, many people accept nuclear umbrella offered by the United States because they may be afraid of China or North Korea. So I'd like to ask your idea how we can resolve this dilemma. How can we make people to listen the core, the heart of Hibakusha's appeal?
Thank you. I'm probably talking more personally than professionally here, but I don't think fear is the solutions to our problems. To listen to the Hibakusha, to listen to their stories, of course it is about pain, sorrow, grief. It's about experience the worst situation, the radiation, living a long life in pain. But their story is a story of turning something into something else. Their story is also a story of memory becoming a force for change. Their story is also a story of resilience. And all of that is a story of hope. In our view, it is a story of how they can be the light the world needs. How can you transform a country which had the devastating effect of war, not just being the victim of, but also the perpetrator, turning it into a nation which have been able to use that story as a turning point towards something much greater for Japanese society and something much greater for all of us. And I think that story is not about fear. It's about openness, and it's about somehow finding the realization that peace is a choice. And we can choose destruction, or we can choose a way towards peace. And the Hibakusha clearly shows that it is possible, even though in a situation of pain, sorrow, grief, to choose peace. And that's the message we want the world to listen to.
All right, we'd like to thank our guest for his comments today. He is, I think, more familiar with shaking hands and handing out prizes than he is with the club's custom, which is a one-year honorary membership in our organization. Oh. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure, and thank you all. Our guest will be on NHK later today.
And thank you so much for all your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you. Hiroshima was quite the experience, I must say. But also a very good city. Thank you for your questions. How long